So I just kind of wanted to start with a little bit of a preface. I've been hearing a lot of the same theme today about how the community has been making really great strides in working together and being efficient in how we work together, and also co-investing on feature development. So this session today is really in line with that whole spirit and is going to help us kind of move through maybe documenting some ideas, maybe of things that we're already doing or we have been doing for years, but getting down in writing kind of best practice about how we want to move together on making decisions and doing it efficiently. So I am Amanda Herford. I am the Scholarly Communications Director for PALNI, and I am part of the Haiku for Consortia team. And I'm joined today by several of my uh, uh, co or my fellow haiku, thank you, my fellow haiku users who participated in a subgroup of the Sustaining Haiku IMLS grant project. So our group collaborated with Invest in Open Infrastructure on a series of 4 working meetings focusing on decision making and collaboration for haiku. And this session is an outcome of those meetings. You can go to the next slide. So let me just share a little bit about our agenda. First, we'll review our goals and we'll do a quick and hopefully fun icebreaker. I think you'll enjoy it. We'll do an overview of our framework, highlighting the roles for decision making and how they work together for us to do key decision making in our community. And we'll invite your feedback with a brainstorm and discussion session, and then we'll just briefly do a close with next steps. So on to our goals. So we really want to make this an interactive session today. So we've kind of worked in lots of ways for you to provide your feedback to us today. So we want to basically share our drafts of our emerging community decision-making framework and to get your feedback so we can integrate that into our final deliverables. So now I'm going to hand it over to Emma to do our icebreaker and to start looking at some of our deliverables.
So to start with, Heather, if you wouldn't mind putting the poll in the chat, that would be great. One thing that IOI really emphasized was if you get creative and if you're like if you add a little bit of fun to the work, that you're often thinking in a different way, and it means that you can have solutions that you didn't think of originally. So to start with, this is one of their questions. I chose different different gifts, but which one do you think represents you making a decision, and for whatever reason, whatever, however it speaks to you, just to sort of get an idea of what the audience is feeling and hopefully help people start engaging, since we do want this to be interactive. Heather, is it possible to show the results in the chat as well?
I believe so. Once we're ready to close it, we'll see what happens.
Okay, we'll give it another minute or so. And if people do want to chime in about why they decided it, this is not, an official anything, just trying to be a little fun. So if you picked one and want to share why, feel free. That was also the one I picked. I don't know, the groove about that one was very funny. I also really liked Cat 2 covering its eyes. I thought that was adorable.
All right, last call. Yeah, we got good participation. Let's see what happens when I end the poll.
I like that, dancing around the decisions that we have to make it. Okay, so a mix, which I think also is great for a community. That means that we all are able to contribute at different points, and use our strengths when they're there, whether it's hiding it first and then making the decision later, or being a cool cat with sunglasses on. So there's a good mix there. Thank you everyone for participating. And if you want to go to the next slide. So to start with, we sort of realized through this process that was really helpful to define some of what we were talking about here. I don't think that anything in this is really anything new, really, hopefully. It's a lot of things that you've already seen. The document itself, which is linked here, and we'll also put in the chat and in the Slack channel. It's broken up by individual roles and then by Haiku user like groups themselves. So I think, the groups being the Haiku and Hyrax interest groups, roadmaps, Samvera community developers, and then sponsoring institutions. And then the individual roles, defining like the product owner, and then with the new technical coordinator position that Rob has stepped into, we wanted to make sure that we defined it as well. And then in there as well, we have defined, as you can see, the term as well, so that we have it documented somewhere when they were appointed, how they were appointed or decided on, and who that would be decided by in the future, since we are trying to make a lot of these decisions more transparent and available for everyone to see. One thing we do want people to keep an eye out for while you're looking at this is if it's clear and helpful. The goal is for all of this to be helpful. So if it's not helpful, then we haven't done our job. So if there's anything that would be more helpful here, anything we're missing, anything that's not clear, please feel free to add a comment on the side or message any of us, put it in the Slack channel, put it in the chat here, so that we can incorporate the feedback. This is meant to be useful, and if it's not understood, that's not useful. And if there are any roles that we are missing in this process, please let us know so that we can incorporate them as well. Next slide. This is the RACI framework. So RACI stands for Responsible, Actionable, Consulted, and Informed. So the way they had us work on it is we chose one task description. So the key question that we decided on was, once we decide to develop a feature as a community, how do we do that efficiently? So we broke it down by different tasks, which you can see on the left here, and then decided who was responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. The accountable was really intended, should be one person. You can see there's a few spots where it's the Haiku leadership trio, which would be Heather, Nick, Don, and Rob as the technical coordinator. But in the other areas, there's really some flexibility with how many people are informed and communicative. We have incorporated some feedback based on what people have said so far. So this is really a work in progress. Like I said, we want this to be useful. So if you're not seeing a process that you would be able to utilize the system for, or see how this process would be possible, then we need to work on that and adjust it with everyone. And then the tasks themselves, you can kind of see as they go down the line, that it starts with prioritizing the features and then developing them, and then at the end deciding what features are added to core and how. So we really tried to break it down into really bite-sized decisions throughout this whole process, so that everyone could see them. As you're looking at it, if there are areas where you think that the roles or groups listed are not correct, or they should be amended, please feel free to comment, as I said, on there, or in any of the other communication channels. And then if there's anything that you think is missing, whether it's a task description, a task itself, you don't think the description is very clear, let us know as well, as you're looking through that. And next slide, and I will pass it over to Amanda.
Thank you, Emma. So the last piece of our framework that we want to share with you today is the community development workflow. And this is one specific output that is in our IMLS grant as a deliverable that we promised. Part of Sustaining Haiku is, again, to figure out how to work together efficiently in order to do development together, things that we all need, that we're not developing in silos, that we're doing this efficiently and really co-investing in the health of haiku for the long run. So this document really builds on the first two documents that Emma shared. So In the first one, we define the roles. So who all are involved in making decisions in haiku. And we have the RACI chart, so kind of digging in a little bit more on those decisions and those roles, who's responsible, accountable, and so on. So this document takes all of those things into account and really builds a full picture of the actual workflow for how a feature might move from the idea phase through prioritization, building the specs for that, coming up with the funding, including seed funding and pledges from the community, all the way through the development process, and then finally integration into core code. And this is a community workflow that was defined for the haiku project because, again, this is all about sustaining haiku. But we are noticing as we're kind of thinking through these processes that other areas of Samvera are affected as well. So we might come up with an idea for haiku and prioritize it and work through the spec development and find out, hey, this is actually better for Hyrax. Or maybe we should reach out to the Avalon group to gather ideas about how this might work. So it really is a holistic for Samvera process. So we wanted to get feedback from everyone across the Samvera community about how this looks. So we want to know from you, are we missing any steps? Is it in the right order? Are there other things that we need to be considering when we're thinking about developing features for the haiku community as a whole? So the actual document itself is kind of in two parts. It's got the larger steps. I believe there's 4 or 5 steps. And then it also has a granular workflow. So the larger steps are kind of broad categories, but the granular workflow is something that we can hope that we can actually follow step by step to actually make this happen in real life. So we are currently piloting this process. Nick Don mentioned earlier that he put a post out in the Slack about how we can invest grant funds. So we have some seed money that we are wanting to spend really on things that are prioritized by the community and to test out this workflow. So as we move through this workflow, we might have some feedback that we want to incorporate. We might see that, oh, this didn't work exactly how we thought it would, but we really do want to kind of come up with a optimal workflow for working together in this way. So again, feel free to look at this document and to add your comments, share feedback in the Slack, email me directly, email any member of this team, and we'd be happy to incorporate your feedback. Okay, so we've shared our 3 framework documents, and now I'm going to hand it over to Jessica for a brainstorming activity and some discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to go over kind of what we're going to do with this brainstorming, and then I'll let you kind of get into it. Eleni, can you open the Padlet? Okay, perfect. So basically, the idea is that we're going to give you 5 minutes to kind of go through these questions. So what would make it easier to contribute ideas or features to the Samvera community? Is the haiku decision-making process we've outlined in this presentation feasible for your institution to fit into? If you're a Hyrax or Avalon user, how do you see your work being incorporated into the haiku decision-making? How should the Samvera community balance openness to contribution with the need for coordinated prioritization? And what would a well-defined maintenance and/or development fund mean for your institution's engagement in the Samvera community? So if you haven't used Padlet before, when you open the link that Nick Don posted in the chat, on the right where I have the arrow pointing, you'll see a toolbar that has options for creating post-it notes or adding text. You should be able to navigate on the left-hand side to the various questions. There's a slide for each question and also a slide at the end for if you have other thoughts. So the idea is that we're going to leave this open for a while after this presentation, but you can answer 1 or 2 questions, take some time to read through the documents in this 5 minutes if you haven't seen them before, or if you want to refresh your memory. So as you go through, add your comments, take some time, but I'm going to say starting now, you'll have 5 minutes, and then we'll come back together at let's say 1:50. That'll give you just a little over 5 minutes to take some time and think about answers to, whichever of these questions you think are the most relevant to you. Okay, everyone, it's 1:50 Eastern time now. If everybody wants to kind of come back to the um, Zoom session away from Padlet. It looks like there has been lots of good participation, so thank you all for sharing your ideas. We're going to go through the slides, and if people have things that they'd like to add or talk about, we have a little bit of time for discussion. So Eleni, if you want to move to the next slide. So what would make it easier to contribute ideas or features to the Samvera community? Would anyone like to unmute and or put in the chat anything that they want to add to what they already contributed to this slide? Christine, I think that we decided the Padlet would be open for, Amanda, do you remember, like a couple of weeks after?
Yeah, I think to the end of this month, I think makes sense.
Yeah, so until the end of May.
Yeah, I'll unmute. I think that gathering feedback or ideas when people are in an experience is a pretty optimal way versus asking them maybe open-ended generative questions in community meetings. It's just you're in a very task-oriented, focused mode when you're using an application that often, um, you know, I guess when I'm using something, I'm like, if there's something super easy to submit and just be like, this should be this way, then I can take action on it and it's never lost, you know?
Yeah, I can totally see that yeah, when it's fresh in your mind, and even especially if you could send like a screenshot to be like, this doesn't work or something like that, that would be really, really helpful. I can see that for sure. Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to add to this question? I see someone mentioned a settings export for an instance. That would be fantastic. I've definitely uh, been trying to set up some testing environments for us, and that is something that, um, yeah, I can see that for sure. Okay, well, let's go to the next question. So, is the haiku decision-making process we've outlined in this presentation and these documents feasible for your institution to fit into? Would anyone like to expand on anything that they added here? I like the let's try it and iterate. Hope so, need to digest, apply it in principle to other communities. I think those are all good ideas for, figuring out whether this is going to be feasible for our community for sure. Okay, if no one has anything to add to that one, let's go to the next question. If you're a Hyrax or Avalon user, how do you see your work being incorporated into haiku decision making? So the one of the comments is unclear. It looks like haiku development work happens and then Hyrax leaders are consulted, and then it feels like haiku outpaces Hyrax, even though Hyrax is central to haiku, but maybe this is trying to address that. I think this is in many ways trying to address that. And the other comment about should the Hyrax product owner or tech lead be brought into the workflow earlier? I know that and other people that were in the group that's IOI group can chime in, but with Rob being in the tech coordinator role for Hyrax and Haiku, we were thinking that that would be a role that He would play um, the technical coordinator between Hyrax and Haiku being the same person kind of helps with some of that. But that's something I think that maybe we need to get more feedback on. Rob?
I am not sure that I think of this as a like flaw in the system. I think there are certainly in a broader scope, it's very nice to have one application build out a feature and then make a broadened version of it that's applicable to everyone for Hyrax, right? So whether that's Haiku, whether that's a different repository that's built on Hyrax, like that pattern of, oh, we built this special built thing just for us so that we could get out the door and get moving. Now we want to provide the like broader community implementation of it is a, I think, useful way to both get my thing now and then share with the community. So I think there are instances of it where I would be ideal to just put the thing in Hyrax and give it to everybody right off the bat, right? But especially for something more complex or a feature needs to be felt out a little bit, I don't think that's an anti-pattern. I think it might be a very good pattern. And Haiku can be one of those implementations that, implements Hyrax. Um, Having said that, I don't know that I am against the fundamental idea of Hyrax and Haiku kind of converging over time. And as that happens, like that'll naturally alleviate some of this stress, right? But I think that if there are specific instances where this is causing friction for folks, I'd like to hear more about that personally, so that we can talk about whether I'm totally open to just being wrong about that being a good approach, right? Or is there some nuance to that is, it's good for this case, but not that case kind of thing?
Thanks, Rob. I think one
Thanks.
thing that came up in our discussions was that sometimes there's a particular, whether it's Haiku or another Hyrax application, where somebody implements something very specific for their institution that we wouldn't want, that other people using Hyrax might not want. And so figuring out like what things might be good in Haiku, but not necessarily. And I think a lot of that has been alleviated with like feature flippers and things like that, but it's just something that we definitely talked about trying to figure out that balance. Kristen Kirsten asked, is the decision making or the energy and effort differences?
Sorry, just to clarify, that concern, going back to Haiku dev work and Hyrax dev work, I'm just curious about, with words like outpaces Hyrax, even though it's central. I'm wondering if that's just an issue of scale and defined effort going into Haiku right now and trying to think of that effort more holistically. The other part of that I thought too is maybe there's just a decision point even in the Haiku process, even if we think it's Haiku, that we poll the Hyrax community as well and just see where that fits. So we're getting the feedback more broadly. So my point was really just a question for whoever posted that or is thinking the question that's in the post-it note there.
Okay, do we want to move to the next question? How should the Samvera community balance openness and to contribution with the need for coordinated prioritization?
Is this where are we still just speaking up?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Um, I wrote down the offering a framework for customization is well supported and maintained, blah, 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 because I felt like I think knapsack was Rob's baby, and I feel like that is exactly what I wrote down based on my understanding. Um, so where there's like the core engine that is Hyrax, I think it fundamentally needs to align with community needs strongly, I guess, where there has to be some careful consideration. And so you trade speed for alignment. Did I say that the right way? I'm a little foggy. So it takes longer to get alignment across all the stakeholders that might use Hyrax. Whereas like if there is a framework within Haiku where you can quickly deploy some significant customizations, that can meet your needs in a shorter term, and then maybe during future releases, you can help inform how that's working. But with everything, there is kind of like that trade-off between, careful prioritization and design versus speed of delivery and meeting the needs of your specific stakeholders. So I think we do a good job of being open to all of that and helping guide people toward what they do. That's my initial take. But I'm open to I'm always sitting in this seat, and I'd be interested to hear what some in the institutions feel about this, if this is also their take.
I think this is something we debated because we do want to make sure that people are able to customize on their own and that it doesn't all have to come centrally through. But so we tried to adjust some of our language a bit more in the RACI chart because of that. One thing that we were very aware of too is that we wanted to make sure that even if it was ultimately decided that it shouldn't be contributed to the full community, that there was a decision that it wasn't contributed to the full community instead of it being like the assumption. So we were really trying to like toe that line of like being intentional about making sure there was a choice there.
Okay, we are kind of at time, so let's move on to the next slide in case there's anybody that has any thing that they'd like to add about a development fund, maintenance or development fund. I think there's good feedback on this slide. And Eleni, do you want to move to the last slide? So I like the more cat gifts, and I like this other comment about having a nice to have list that's for the community so that they know how things are aligned.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jessica. I think Jessica said this perfectly. Go on to the next slide, Eleni, please. We'll make these slides available. It has all the relevant links. So yes, please continue to add your feedback through the end of the month. Appreciate it.